Hey guys, how you doing? I do apologise about that earlier on. Had a few issues. Like as I say, this is my first time ever doing a Facebook Live video, so I'm going to try and invite our guest over. Let me just get some. Excuse me. Let me just get some light here. It's rather dark, isn't it here? Right, let's have a look. Right, here we go. So I just invited our guest over. So fingers crossed. Let's see how it goes. Because otherwise, if this isn't going to work, it's going to be me speaking instead. So bear with us 2 seconds and then we'll be up and running. Hopefully, he says. Let's have a look. No. Here we go. Come on. Right, here we go. We've just invited our guest over. So, yes, we are
Yeah.
live. Hey, finally we got there, mate. Oh my God, I was like
It's
thinking,
way more complicated than it should be.
I know, tell me about it. So I was swiping left to do it. And for some reason, it just wouldn't invite you and crazy. But we finally did it. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah,
After all
yeah.
that.
Here now.
Yes, 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 we are here. We are live. Facebook Live. Let's do this. Let's do this. So,
Okay.
without further ado, we've got our very special guest, David McCrae. How are you doing, my friend? How are you doing after all that?
Awesome, man. It's actually my second live video of today, so I'm well in the groove of going live. So hopefully can do something good for the audience and give some
Yeah,
value.
definitely. I mean, I'm all about trying to create as much value as we can to our audience. So, let me do my best to try and introduce you. So, this is David McCrae. He's correct me if I'm wrong, a personal development trainer. He is a speaker. He also does some coaching as well. And I think the best way to start this interview, because I think a lot of people have a lot of skepticism towards like a lot of this stuff, like personal development, all this. So I think
Yeah.
it's really best that we start this off with a story, with your journey. So before you go into what you do and more in depth in what you do, let's talk about you, your story, your journey. Let's take it right from the beginning to now. Is that possible?
Yeah, yeah, let's go for it. So I'll give you the blurb of my story and then we can evaluate kind of as things go on. So essentially, the critical moment of my life was at 22 years old. And this was a time when my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He passed when I was 22 years old. And I got the opportunity and I was incredibly lucky to spend the last 60 minutes of dad's life with him, to have this final conversation with him, to say all the things that I wanted to say to him before he went. And in those last 60 minutes, it really, when something like that happens, it really shows you how precious life is. And that sounds like a little bit of a cliche, but when you see that in 1 minute, someone is there and the next minute they're gone, it makes you realize what a fragile veneer of life that we live on. And this was something that I realized. And in that final discussion, I came upon these three important truths. And there were three things that I said to my dad. And I realized how important they were, because when I was faced with death, those were the things I wanted to say. When I was faced with that immediacy of I'm going to lose my dad, and this is the last time I'm going to ever speak to him, what do I want to say to him? And these three things came to me, and we'll talk about a little bit more as this discussion goes on. I want to fast forward a little bit to after my dad had passed. And I was the last one to leave his hospice room. And I remember standing at the door of the room and I looked back at dad lying there on his deathbed. And I realized that one day that was going to be me. One day that's going to be all of us. We'll all have our last 60 minutes here on earth. And eventually we're all going to pass. And when we lie on our deathbed, we're going to look back on our lives and we're going to judge our life. We're going to judge, was this a good life? Did I live my life to the fullest? And at that moment of time, at 22 years old, I look back at my life realized that I hadn't been living my life to the fullest. I hadn't lived a life that I was truly pleased with and I was truly proud of. And in that moment, I made a decision that things were going to change. I was going to change the script of how I was living my life. And I was going to make a complete and utter paradigm shift in who I was and what I did. And that was the catalyst for everything that I do here and now.
So you talk about this script, and I've seen it in a lot of your things that you've done about this narrative. Can you tell us a little bit about this script, this narrative that you were playing, or you played, or what a lot of people play, or if you can just expand a bit more into that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So what my work is really based on now is authenticity. And the root of the word authentic is author. And to be authentic means to be the author of your own life. And this is what my brand and my movement is now called. It's called Author Your Life. And it's based on that premise of being authentic, living your true self and living your best. And the script that I was living in up until that point at that doorway was not my true self. I was trying to be something that I wasn't. I had this persona and this mask, and I put them up for a variety of reasons: to gain social validation, to protect myself from some of my fears and lack of belief, to hide old wounds of love and issues with attachment and fear of intimacy. There were all sorts of little narratives and little scripts that I was living to that wasn't really David. It was a shadow self of David. And that was what I realized in that moment, was I was living the shadow version of myself, not the real authentic version of myself. I could be so much greater than who I was at that point. I could live so much fuller with a much more powerful expression. And more importantly, I could use my inner gifts and my inner qualities to serve others. And that was something that I definitely had not been doing up until that point.
So I hope you don't mind us. I mean, if you don't mind me asking you, before all of this happened, before the passing of your dad, can you give us a slight glimpse of what life was actually like before this whole transition happened? What was going on? Was it, is it something, what was the difference between the life between now and now, before the passing and now? How does it differ, and what was going on, and what happened then, if you can give a little bit of a glimpse, and what's going on now?
Okay, so my life up until that point was so much about seeking validation from external sources, things outside of me giving me my efficacy and my sense of identity. So I was always trying to be the center of attention. And for me, if anyone watching this is familiar with the works of Tony Robbins talks about 6 intrinsic human needs that drive us. My driving need is significance. And up until that point, I was seeking significance through external validation. So the way that I dressed, I had these big daft earrings in. I was doing like stuff in my hair. I was like big and spiky. I had all these rings and bracelets. I wore like flash clothes. And then I was always going out boozing and partying, trying to be such a lad all the time, doing the stupid stuff, creeping out on women. And it was all about it was really just screaming out, love me, love me, love me. And everything that I did was a scream for validation and love, ultimately, and to be significant. The way that I sought significance at that point was to be the center of the social group, to be fulfilling the persona that's kind of put to us as young males nowadays, is to be the partier, is to be the boozier, is to have the number of notches on your bedpost, all those kind of things. That's how I was seeking significance. But that wasn't really me. And so the second part of your question was, how has that changed? So my primary driver is still significance, but the way that the mechanism through which I seek that is completely different now. So for me, significance is all about, what can I do to make an impact on the world? What can I do to influence and serve other people? Yeah, I can still be someone who's very sociable, someone who's very charismatic, someone who has, I'm very lucky to have a wide network of friends and acquaintances, people who I really get on with, and loads of communities and groups that I'm a part of. I can still have that social significance of feeling important and valued in a community. But it all comes from a very different alignment and a very different expression of that core need. Is now significant. It's all about what impact am I making on others and on the world with what I'm doing.
That's awesome. I think the fact that you've made that's a massive that's a huge transition from where you are. And in fact, I mean, although I don't drink myself, I understand the kind of culture that is very prevalent in the youth, really, with pubbing and clubbing and all that sort of stuff. I'm not saying that's bad or making any judgments, but a lot of the things that you mentioned about seeking out validation, approval, I think if we're being completely honest with this, a lot of us go through that process of trying to seek that validation. So what I'm trying to understand is that shift. You've obviously mentioned your father passing, because I think that we all go through certain challenges, but those certain things that there's certain things that are there in our life, like approval, seeking validation. It's not always hard to shift, is it? Sometimes it's there. So what causes this change? You know what I'm saying? To obviously you had a massive event that happened in your life. Was there any sort of techniques, or was there anything, or any sort of mindset shift that happened for you to change this? Because the reason why I ask this is because, as I mentioned, we all go through this. So even if you were to give a tip, what did you do, or how did you do that to be able to just flip that, and change it? What did you do?
Well, I suppose here we get into the three truths, as I mentioned earlier. In that final discussion I had with Dad, there were these three truths that I talked about. And there was these three statements that I said to Dad, one after the other. I said, I'm grateful for the fantastic job you did of raising me.
Yeah.
I'm incredibly proud to be your son. I love you, Dad. And what those three truths were gratitude, identity, and love. And I knew that those three truths had importance, because in that final moment when the immediacy of Dad's death became clear, of all the things that I could have talked to him about and I wanted to talk to him about, those were the three things that I did. So therefore I knew these things had some significance, and there was something that was also intrinsically important to me, because other people in that situation might have said different things and might have wanted to talk about different things, but for me, those were the three things that came out of me. So I knew there was something intrinsically important in those three truths. So in terms of talking about a strategy or a shift, it was really looking to cultivate those three things in my life. So number one was gratitude.
Yeah.
Learning to have an appreciation for all the things that I had rather than that I didn't. It was learning to recognize that there is abundance all around us. And I don't necessarily mean in the Western world way of we all have food and shelter and all these kind of things. I mean, abundance of there is always an opportunity out there. There is always an amazing person to meet. There's always an incredible experience to have, and recognizing that abundance exists all around us. And the more that you feel that sense of abundance, the more you start to recognize it, the more you start to notice it in the world around you, and the more that abundance starts to come into your life. So that was truth number one.
If I can just comment on that. So from gratitude, I mean, you probably can give me more information on gratitude. I think it's kind of like, I'm grateful for, you mentioned it, dropped it in a little bit there where you talked about how I'm grateful for food and shelter and all this sort of stuff. And you've added another dimension to that. And you've mentioned like abundance and opportunities. So just before you go into the second one, which is identity, in what way do you incorporate this abundance or opportunity? You've mentioned it briefly there. So if you don't mind just going into a little bit more, that'd be awesome. This is an example or what have you, or what do you do?
Yeah, sure. So there's some regular practices. So as part of my morning and evening routine, I focus on gratitude. So my morning meditation, I find three experiences in my past that I can focus on and be grateful for.
Yeah.
In the evening, I have a gratitude journal where I write down the 3 things that I'm grateful for from
Mm.
that. Those are regular practices if you want your strategies and your tools and your hacks. Those are things. But for me, the real power of gratitude comes when you experience gratitude in the moment. And what I mean by this is choosing gratitude as a reaction to the events of your life. So for example, when you're in a negative situation, when you're in something that's challenging you, rather than focusing on the negative aspects of the challenge, the stress, the anxiety, if you can find something to be grateful for in that moment, in the midst of that challenge, that is where the real power of gratitude comes. Because gratitude is something, it's very easy to feel grateful when everything's going good for us. When, oh, I've got the promotion and I've got the nice partner and I've got the fancy car and the good holiday. It's easy to feel gratitude when you've got all these things.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
gratitude comes when you don't have those things, and you have to really pull and search for gratitude. So when you're in the midst of
Yeah.
the situations, when I'm facing struggle and challenge, the first thing that I kind of look for is, what can I be grateful for in this scenario? And more often than not,
Mm.
to be grateful for very quickly, and that completely shifts my orientation on that particular challenge. And I stop seeing it even as a challenge and a struggle, and then I start to see it as an opportunity and an experience. And that is where the real power comes from.
Right. You mentioned I really like that point that you mentioned, David. What can I be grateful for in this scenario? And then that way it tunes you into the present moment. And I think that's really important. You mentioned a really important point there where we often look for happiness in the promotion and all these sorts of things, but it's all about in the now. And I think that's a really good question to ask yourself in order to get yourself tuned in to being grateful. So that is an awesome point. So thank you for that. Identity, go on. So your first truth was gratitude, which you talked about.
Yeah.
Second one, identity. Hit it away, David.
All right. Okay. So this is the second truth, and this is really starting to hone in on that notion of authenticity and being authentic that I was talking about. For as long as you aren't in alignment with your true self and your true mission, you'll always have a sense of disconnect, and you'll always have a sense of happiness in your life. No matter how the rest of your things in life are in place, if you aren't living a life that isn't truly you, there is going to be that disconnect and source of unhappiness, and you'll never ultimately be fulfilled. So what the real purpose of identity is really discovering who you are and what you're supposed to do. Because I truly and honestly believe that all of us have a particular mission in our lives. And this doesn't have to be something grand like saving the world and ending poverty and all these grand kind of schemes. For some people, their mission in life is to make good coffee. They love the process of making coffee. They enjoy the artistry of where the beans are sourced from, how you mix the different concoctions together. They love serving people with coffee. They love being able to bring the joy of coffee into other people's lives. For some people, that is their mission in life, and that is not something to be ridiculed or demeaned because it's something that's small. Oh, you're only supposed to make coffee in life. If that is your mission in life, and that is something that truly sparks a passion and a purpose within you, that is what you need to be. The person who is supposed to make coffee and tries to be a lawyer isn't going to be happy. The person who is supposed to be a lawyer and tries to make coffee also isn't going to be happy. So what identity is about is really discovering who you are right deep at the core. Who is the core of Sadiq? Who is the core of David? What are my qualities? What are my skills? What are my strengths? And how am I supposed to express these into the world? And that's what it's all about. It's all about self-expression. And this is, it's a deep, elaborative journey. I'm still tapping in more and more to my identity of who I am. But now, we talked earlier about the identity that I wasn't. I now am moving more and more every day towards an identity that I know is me. Every day I'm feeling more and more aligned with who I am and what I'm supposed to do. And from that, I have a sense of fulfillment. I have a sense of drive. I have a sense of purpose because I know I'm living a life that is in alignment with my authentic identity.
That's so awesome that you mentioned that, David, because I think a lot of us, are trying to figure out who we are and what we're about. And the fact that you mentioned about this, I really like the example of you mentioned about a coffee barista who's trying to be a lawyer, or a lawyer trying to be a coffee barista. It's trying to figure out who you really are. And every single person is different, and we can't do something. It's not always as grandiose as, you don't have to do something as big as saving the world, as you mentioned. So that was a really awesome point there. And I think if we were to say anything to our viewers right now, is that figuring out who you are, and as you mentioned, it's a process, it's a gradual process. It's not all of a sudden like you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh yeah, this is what I'm about. Yeah. But it's more of a journey of discovery. And every single day is a day that you could potentially become closer to discovering yourself and your identity. So awesome point, awesome truth there for the second one. So tell us about the third truth then, David, that you discovered.
So yeah, this is the third, and this is the most powerful, and it's all about love, and it's being in love, it's expressing love, it's living a life of love. And this is more than just the romantic notion of love. It's living in love with yourself, expressing the love within you, and putting love into the world. And a lot of spiritual teachings and personal development teachings say that in life we have only real two choices. We make a choice based on love, or we make a choice based on fear. And if you look at every single decision you make, you can trace it back to its core as one of those two intrinsic drivers. And I do believe that's the case. I think everything we do in life, we do it from a place of fear, or we do it from a place of love. If I go back to my earlier description of how I was living in a place of fear, a fear of not being accepted, a fear of not being significant. So everything that I did was motivated from that fear of avoiding a lack of validation, avoiding not being loved, avoiding not being confident, avoiding being exposed and vulnerable. And the shift I had to make was to let go of my fear and to start making decisions based on love. So this, of course, started with myself. I had to start making love and decisions based on me. What is best for me? What practices do I need to do to cultivate myself? What habits do I need to ingrain? What work do I need to embark on? It was also love in terms of my business and my career that I have now, is doing work that I love and doing really channeling. We talked earlier about what is our mission in life, really channeling my particular mission in life. Because if I channel my particular mission in life, then that will come from a place of love. It's my purest expression of who I am, and ultimately the purest expression of all of us is love. And then thirdly, of course, this also comes in the form of relationships, is really making that decision on surrounding yourself with love. And again, I don't mean this in terms of a romantic sense of love, but are the people in your life negative or positive? Are they people who inspire you, who motivate you, who drive you? Are they people that you find fascinating and interesting and funny? Or are they the opposite of all of those things? And if you're going to truly live in life, truly live in love, express love, and live a life of love, then you need to be surrounded by love. Because it's so much easier to live in love when you're surrounded by love.
Yeah,
but if
agreed.
you every day with the news, the media, with the stories of war, pessimism, conflict, if you're constantly comparing yourself to others through Instagram and Facebook, if you're living in a family environment or home environment that's constantly negative, constantly pessimistic, how are you ever going to live by love? Because all you're surrounded with is fear. So of course, all of your decisions then are going to be based on fear. So the third most powerful truth is to find that place of love, is to find the love within yourself and the practices that you require to live within love, to have your own self-love. You need to be doing that work that you love, following your personal mission in life that's based on love. And then of course, you need to have love around you. These are inspiring, motivating, positive people, whether that be your family, whether that be your friends, whether that be people who are in your line of work, people, role models, those who inspire you, who motivate you. That is how we live a life of love.
That was awesome, man. The third point, that was very much spot on. I mean, love is, it's so, there's so much to it than the romantic side, as you mentioned. And there's so many dimensions of love. And the way you've described it in the different aspects of love, I think that's something that we can all relate to. So that was awesome. I mean, the fact is that you've been through quite a challenging experience. I mean, let's talk about if you don't mind, let's talk about the experience itself that you had. I mean, you've had a loved one of yours that's literally about to pass away in front of your very eyes. And the fact is you were able to learn so much from that experience. And it's allowed you to learn these lessons, these truths, which are very much universal to all of us. You know, you talk about being grateful, having identity, and also love. And all of these aspects are just so, you know, if we can just do a little bit to be able to implement that, I'm pretty sure that we can definitely live a happier life. So that's absolutely awesome. So what do you do, and what difference do you make to people with the work that you do right now, David?
Okay, so those three truths have evolved over the past few years. And at the beginning, they were truths largely for myself. I knew that I wanted to use them to serve others, but ultimately, the first part was they were part of my own personal development, to change the direction my life was going into. And as I've shared my story more, as I've shared these truths and these teachings more and more, these truths have evolved. And what I've realized now is that they're actually three smaller truths of three larger principles of how to live. And these three large principles are consciousness, calling, and connection. So gratitude is a smaller part of an overall truth of consciousness, which is all about living in alignment with ourselves and being positive and confident in who we are, ultimately loving ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Identity is a smaller part of a larger truth of calling. And this is all about this life's mission that I was talking about earlier. This is living with our purpose in life, knowing our purpose, following our passion, having a drive and a will to succeed in fulfilling our life's mission, having a very specific purpose for why we're here. That's our calling in life.
Yeah.
And then the third part is connection. And even love, something as grand as love, is actually a slightly smaller truth of this wider principle of connection. And connection is really just understanding our place in the world and having a relationship with everything around us, not just the people, but the world. And this is where we start getting into the realms of spirituality, which people may or may not engage with. That's totally cool. But I think everyone needs to recognize that there is something bigger than us, whether that is just simply the fact that there is a lot of space out there, there are stars and galaxies, whether that is nature, the universe, God, whatever it is. I think we all understand that we are a very small part of something that is bigger than us. And that is the third notion of connection, is recognizing that we are a small part in that larger whole and having a relationship with the larger part of that whole. So these are three aspects that come together: consciousness, calling, and connection. And they form a triad. And if we get these three things right, if we cultivate these three principles, in the middle we have fulfillment. And this is the ultimate state of living. You can see that in the formulation of the word itself. Fulfillment. To be filled full. There is nothing empty within us. We have everything. And that is the state that I aim to help people achieve, is this state of fulfillment. And so my whole movement in teaching is based around getting people to this state of fulfillment. And the name of this movement is Author Your Life. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier about authenticity. So being your authentic self is to be the author of your life. And so what I want people to recognize is that they are the authors of their lives. We all hold the pen in our hand. Now, when we look back in the past, that script, that narrative is already written. The pen is on the pages. We can go back, we can learn from it, we can reflect upon it, but we can't edit it and we can't erase it. That story is already written up until this point. But at this point here, we have blank pages ahead of us. and you can write whatever script you want for yourself. But if you want to write the scripts that you desire, you have to pick up that pen here and now, because if you don't make that conscious decision to pick up that pen, start cultivating the change that you desire, this script from the past is going to keep on writing because it's got no impetus to change. So if you don't like this script up until this point, then there are conscious actions, decisions that you need to make that change. And this is where I start to work with people. When people have had something in their life, and I believe that each of us has a really critical moment in their lives where we say, this is enough. What's happened so far, I'm not putting up with this anymore. And for me, that was the loss of my dad. For everyone, it's a variety of different things. That might be a breakup with someone, that might be losing a job, that might be a serious physical illness, but whatever it is, I think everyone has this critical moment in their life. You know, some people call it a midlife crisis, and it's a kind of an affectionate term, but actually that midlife crisis represents a very serious transition point that we all go through, not just our midlife, but some point we say, this narrative isn't really the story that I want to live. Because when I get to the end, when I'm lying on that deathbed, I want to look back and say that I enjoyed the story that I was the hero of. I want to be the hero who has the happy ending. And so I work with people who've made that decision to change the script. And through working on these 3 principles of consciousness, calling, connection, this is how I help them achieve it.
That's awesome. That is really, really awesome. The fact that you've been able to get this thing called fulfillment in this triad, I think that's awesome. And I think it's fair to say is that you can only work with people who are willing to work on themselves, you know, who've realized this point, and I love this thing that you talk about, this book, being the author of your own book, you know, because we've already written so many pages. And as you mentioned, as you quite rightly mentioned there, David, is that we can't do anything about what's already written, can we? We can't do anything about that. All we can do is realize, yes, these are the pages, or this is the parts of my life that this is what's already happened in my life right now. But, you know, now I'm at the point where if I continue to keep doing what I've always done, then the pages will keep being written over and over again. And so you're right. We all go through these different pain points in our lives. So the fact that you've mentioned that is really, really good. So that is an absolutely awesome point, you know. So great. Thank you ever so much for giving us that point. So I think I'd like to unless of course there's anything else that you want to say until I say this point, is that how can we all connect with you, David? Because I mean, you've already given us a whole load of value with what you've just said right now, and I'm sure there's probably people out there who are willing to connect with you. And in fact, there's something else I want to mention, is that you've already experienced pain in your life. The fact that you've experienced the passing of your father, there's a lot of other people who have experienced that, something similar to that. So probably people out there who want to connect with you there. So how can we connect with you? In what ways? And I'm going to put all the descriptions, if I can, in this Facebook video. Go on, tell us.
All right, awesome. So I'll give you my social media tags. So my Facebook is David McCrae, personal development trainer. Yeah. I'm on Instagram, which is at David_McCrae. McCrae, by the way, is spelled MCCRAE, Roger Alpha Echo. Everyone gets that spelling wrong, so I better clarify that. So yeah, my Instagram is at David_McCrae, and then there's another underscore, because a lot of Dave McCrae's have taken all the good tags, so I've had to put in these little punctuation marks to get myself there. Who knows, when I'm enough and famous enough, I can just buy all the tags back.
Exactly, yeah.
So
that's awesome.
My Facebook, my Instagram. If you want to check out my website, it's www.davidmccrae-pdt, stands for personal development trainer.com. So there you can find a little bit more about my story. It's kind of it's a little bit of a hub for it's online CV, really. It's kind of what I've done with my speaking. It's got a link to sign up to my mailing list if that's something that you're interested in, and it's also got a page talking about my membership site, which I'll discuss now. So I have the Author Your Life community. I've just launched a Facebook group, So if you type into Facebook or For Your Life Community, that's our free Facebook group, and there I share a lot more of the training and the concepts and the strategies, elaborating on these 3 principles of consciousness, calling, connection.
Yeah.
And we also have a paid membership platform, which is where we go deeper into the training, and is really kind of a journey through how you really become the author of your life and creating that triangle for yourself. And you find more information about that in the Facebook group, but try the Facebook group out before you advance from there.
Also, there's another thing you haven't mentioned. That was your, how could we forget, your book. We didn't talk much about your book, did we? How could we have forgotten about that?
I know.
We got so engaged in our conversation there. No, you got your book. Tell us a bit about your book, because I'm sure this is the first bit of information that most people would love to hear about your story and how you got to where you are. So go on, what is your book called? I know what it is, but you tell me. Hell, you tell us, I should say.
So the book is titled The Last 60 Minutes because, of course, it's all about those last 60 minutes that I spent with my dad, those 3 truths that I learned. And in the book is really an elaboration on those 3 truths, how I've used them to make a change in my life and how I've used them to make a change in other people's. So what we've touched upon today is really just kind of skimming the surface of the 3 truths, just unfortunately due to the nature of the time we've had and the interview format. But if you want to really delve deep into what these truths mean and how you can cultivate them in your life, then I've got my book, The Last 60 Minutes, which is an Amazon #1 bestseller. Just saying.
Awesome. So, yes.
Helping people.
Definitely.
So I'll let them kind of speak as to sort of the power and the value of it. And the book really is for anyone who is on that cusp that I described. So you've gone to a point in your life where you want to make a change and you want a life that has new meaning and new purpose in it, but maybe you're unsure about how exactly you're going to go around about this. What are the mechanisms through which you're going to make this change? So the book is a resource that you can use to help you from kind of day 1, point 0 of your change, and how you can start to make that journey. And everything that I do kind of leads on from the book. So if I was going to recommend a path for people in terms of following on from this interview, give me a follow on social media, the Facebook, the Instagram, buy the book, read the book, and if all that stuff is engaging with you, the things that I share on social media, the content in the book, then I have the Author Your Life community, the Facebook group, and then the paid membership program with all the extra training after that. So that's the kind of progression that I'd recommend people follow.
Yeah, I mean, what we'll do is we'll get all the details together, and I'll put it in a Facebook post or all the notes of this interview, so then that way people have the links to click on, which is awesome. Well, David, thank you so much for having me, well to be on this interview, really. And
thank you for having me.
It's okay. I mean, I think what just before we go, I think what makes you appealing is that you've been through a certain pain in your life, and a lot of people don't do much about that. Some people are victims and they don't really move on past that. A lot of people do, some people don't. But the fact is that you've been able to take these truths that you've learned from the last 60 minutes of being with your father, and you've been able to create a life now that has a lot more meaning and has a lot more purpose. So for me, from myself to yourself, I'd say you're doing absolutely amazing. And I really, really want other people to be able to, watch this interview. I'm going to put it on LinkedIn if I can, and for them to be able to view this interview. So in that way they can be inspired to say, you know what, I'm no longer going to be a victim. I'm going to use this to move forward and do something with meaning and purpose. And that's what really struck me about you. So thank you so much for being a guest. And yeah, so I think we'll end it there, but you take care. And as I say, for you guys, I'll definitely see you soon, and all the best. Take care. See you, David, and see you guys. Take care now. Thanks. Take care. Bye.